Hey guys, Ryan from Vior here, and today we've got two of these new 4090s and an Intel 13900K, and we're going to try to get two gaming computers to run off of one single processor. So let's see if we can do it. We've come a long way since back in the first gen i7 days, which was actually my first real gaming computer that I built. You know, this is based on the I guess i7 950, which was an absolute beast at the time. You know, I remember this processor being almost $1,000 back in 2010, and it was just a 4-core, 8-thread processor, and they used to include these sexy little lunch boxes for you when you bought the processor. But now we've got these absolute monsters in the new 13th gen, the 13900K. So it's kind of weird how Intel set these up, right? Where we've got the 8 P cores and then 16 E cores. Well, for gaming, really only concerned with the 8 P cores. The rest of the E cores are really for the higher end workhorse applications like your Blender and such, right? So you know, with that many cores, we really don't need it for gaming. And today, most games still aren't really well optimized to run a lot of different cores. They really run very well on 1, 2, 3, 4 cores. Past that, there's really not a huge amount of performance gain in most situations. So what we're going to try to do is split that processor up and fit two of these chunky 4090s on here, which we're going to probably have to use a PCI bridge because I don't think I'm fitting two of these on here and they'll actually be able to cool themselves, right? This should be pretty awesome, and we're going to load a piece of tech on here called Unraid. You know, if you're not familiar with that, it is pretty amazing what you're able to do. So we can actually virtualize the different Windows machines underneath of it. It's like a Linux, really. So you might be wondering why you would want to do something like this. So it's actually kind of interesting. So say you're in a scenario where you have, you know, it's a husband and wife and they're both gamers, or you have roommates and they both want to have a high performance gaming machine, but you don't necessarily have the budget, or you might not want to have two crazy high performance computers sitting right next to each other if you happen to game in the same room. So the benefit would be that you only have to buy one case, you only have to buy one motherboard, you only have to buy one processor. It's just everything that you would normally do in a computer. You might need a little bit more RAM for this, but we'll get into that later. But other than that, you just need a secondary GPU. And from there, all through the magic of Unraid and Linux, we can split everything up, divide it equally between the two different people, and each of them can have a really, really high performance gaming system. So you know, today, gosh, you know, we've got this in the 4090, and people are hitting damn near 500 FPS in Call of Duty. There's no reason to do that. You know, but if you're happy with, you know, I guarantee we can probably get, you know, over 100 FPS out of this guy at 4K, even with splitting this thing up. To start, we're going to be jumping into the BIOS. That's where everything happens in terms of booting this up successful. So what we're going to be looking for in this case is some Intel specific settings. You know, it's really not a whole lot different than setting up a normal computer, but there are some specific settings we're looking for, like Intel VTD and any virtualization related settings inside the BIOS. And what I mean by virtualization settings is like, you know, Linux is the base operating system that we're actually installing on here. But we want the ability for Linux to pass off the devices, whether it be built into the motherboard, like sound cards or maybe a network card, and definitely the GPUs. We want Linux to be able to hand that off to the operating system that sits underneath of it. In this case, we're going to be using Windows 10. We're going to give full control of these devices to the virtual machines. So let's hop into the BIOS. All right, so we got it in the BIOS. So now we're just gonna be looking for the settings I was talking about. So really it's not a whole lot different than setting up a normal computer, but today, like I said, we're doing this nice and quick. We're not gonna be worrying about, you know, overclocking the processor, or do anything with the memory. We're just looking for these virtualization settings. So we're gonna wanna head over to the Advanced tab. In this case, we're using the Asus BIOS. I basically just kind of go through each of these and look for the settings I need to find. So in the CPU, like right here, we're looking for Intel VMX virtualization. So that's on. Something else. This one's really important. This is in the SA tab. We're looking for that VTD That enables the Intel to kind of let the control of the devices happen by Linux. Pass it down to different pass it down to different operating systems, and then this IOMMU groups, very, very important. So when a computer boots, it takes all the devices and splits it up into different kind of roadways or highways, I guess, if you will. And what the IOMMU group allows is to say a graphics card might be on its own group. And so the group is actually what we're going to be using to pass through to the virtual machine. So that needs to be enabled so we have a lot more granular control over the different devices inside the motherboard. So a very important setting. So this all looks good. And then in the boot section, we're going to have compatibility support turned off. And then secure boot, we're going to have set to other OS instead of for Windows UEFI mode. We're going to leave that on other OS. And then boot configuration, we want to disable fast boot and some of the other settings that we really don't need for Linux. It's a rather quick operating system anyway. Okay, and with that, we're just going to save changes and reset. All right, so at this point, we got the BIOS set up. Now we just need to build Unraid. We just need a little tiny flash drive, and 16 gig works fine, and then a second computer. So let's get that plugged in, and then we're going to be going to Unraid's website. Then we just want to download this installer, nice and quick. Yep, then from here, we're going to be going with the stable version. The next is something like beta versions, but we're just going to go with stable. We know it works, and then just the newest version of Unraid. Then we want to name it, so just leave it as Tower. Because once this is actually booted, we're going to connect to it through the web GUI, just through a web interface. So, Chrome or whatever else, we're just going to actually remotely connect to it, and that's how we do all of our configuration. So yeah, we've got the USB drive selected, and we just press right. All right, cool. So once that is done, we just need to go and check out the drive. Yep, looks like we're good to go. So this would be a trial version of Unraid. Again, we're just testing. And then if you end up really liking the software, which I run this at home, lots of different options in terms of buying the software. So let's get this drive put in the computer and see if we can get it booted up. Just plug in the flash drive, turn on the computer, and you'll see just a bunch of command line going through, just like a basic Linux startup scenario. And then once it gets to the end, if all goes well, you're basically just going to see an IP address that pops up down at the bottom of the screen. And from there, you just want to connect with a secondary machine to that IP address. In this case, we're looking for .121. You can do that, or you can type in if you know the name of the server. The Unraid always has a default name of just Tower. So you can type in / Tower into any web browser, and then it's just going to come up with Unraid. It's just going to pop up there. So we're just going to do the root username, and then password, whatever you want your password to be. Okay, there we go. So yeah, we're just going to be doing the trial of Unraid today to test out and see if we can get this thing working. Yeah, obviously you can purchase and do whatever else if you decide you really like Unraid like I do. Okay, so what we're met with is just like the main screen of Unraid. So if you scroll down through here, you're just going to see all the different disk slots available. So by default, it has 40 disk slots. It's really neat. If you don't know about Unraid, I'd really recommend just looking into it, watch a few different videos on it. But it's exactly what it means in the name, Unraid. It's not RAID. It doesn't work that way. You can have these 24 disks or 22 disks, and then you only have the 2 parity. So you don't waste as much space as you do in a normal RAID setup. But you do lose speed. That is one thing with Unraid. It's not the fastest thing, but in our case, we're going to be using NVMe, so we're really not concerned about the speed. So I'm just going to drop this down. We just have 2 NVMe's in this system. So it always counts the 2 parity slots as slots, but we're not going to be using those today. We're going to be taking our 2 NVMEs that show up down here, and we're just going to drop them into our disk 1 and 2 slots. And so we can do this now, and then in future, if you're ever worried about data resiliency or maybe an NVMe dying or something like that, you can always just pop into the 3rd NVMe into your system and then add it to parity. So then you can actually be resilient. If one of these other NVMes die, you'll be safe because the other one will be available. Shut down the system, take out the bad one, put another one back in, and it'll just rebuild for you. It's absolutely fantastic. So we're just going to start with that, our 2 NVMEs. And then we just click start. All right, there we go. The array is online, and that just means the array of disks. So however many disks that you have. And there's a lot of different ways you can set this up, but again, we're just doing this quick. Okay, so we need to format the disks. They're just in whatever format that Linux doesn't like. So we're just going to simply say yes. It's going to wipe the data. There we go. See, it says formatting up here. Perfect. Okay. So we've got 2 1 terabyte NVMEs with 2 terabyte usable. And then this flash drive down here is actually the flash drive for Unraid itself. So this is what we installed the operating system onto. So then we can just poke around up here. We've got shares. The way these work is just like a normal network appliance. It's something that might sit on your network that you can target, transfer data to and from. That's super handy. And that's what it really is. Out of the box, it's a network device, or a NAS, network attached storage. So yeah, the settings tab, apps. This is something that we absolutely need. The apps are absolutely fantastic. It has the ability to run Docker. We can get all sorts of different applications to run on here. We can add plugins. And these all run without an operating system. So you can run these apps without actually having Windows installed or anything, but they actually just run on the network. Okay, so from here, we just need to download the Windows ISO so we can get some VMs running on here. And the ISO is just a digital format of a DVD. So we just need to get that media, download it to our secondary machine, and then we can give it to Unraid to start creating these virtual machines. So for that, we're just going to we're going to look up Windows 10. Yep. And we're looking for the ISO. So download this media creation tool. So once this loads, we just want to select create an ISO. Next. Yeah, that's fine, but yes, we want Windows 10. That'll have the different versions. We're going to install Windows 10 Pro. Then yes, the 64-bit version, and create an ISO file. Okay, so now we have Windows 10 downloading. We need to make sure that we can connect to the Unraid shares and be able to move that Windows image up to Unraid. So, it's a fresh install of Unraid, so we need to make sure we can connect. So we're just going to be looking for tower. It says it's empty. So we need to go back to Unraid. We need to go to the shares tab. And then ISOs. It already has an ISO folder made, so we just need to click on that. And then down here where it says export, we want to export that to the network. And that just means it'll present itself to be able to be accessed or seen. And then once that's done, we need to go over to tools, and then new permissions, go down to disks, all, user shares, all, start. So what we're doing here is making sure that we give ourselves permissions to access these shares over the network. It's a fresh install, so there's just a little bit of configuring that you need to do. Again, if you're interested in Unraid, let us know. Maybe we'll do another deeper video on how it kind of functions. And then from there, we need to go to the main tab and then just reboot. So once we reboot the server, it comes back online, we reconnect, we start Unraid or start the array. Once that's finished, then we should be able to see the network drives. So there they are. So we're looking for the ISO share. And then in here, we want to grab the, where is the Windows? There it is. Okay. We're just going to grab this Windows ISO we downloaded. upload it to the network share. Okay, so that's transferring to Unraid right now. So from there, we're going to go to Settings, VM Manager. All right, so in VM Manager, we're looking for these VirtIO drivers. So what these drivers are is, because we're going to be presenting virtual disks to the virtual machine, and so we have to be able to create those. So these drivers allow Windows to see those virtual disks that we create, along with a number of other things that just kind of come with running something as a VM. So just simply press download. Now we just need to head over to the VMs tab. So from here, this is where we actually start to make the VM. It's really quick to get set up and get going. So we just need to go to Add VM. All the different types of operating systems that we can run. So like I said, it's not just limited to Windows. If you had some older applications that you wanted to run Windows XP on, or any of your different flavors of Linux, you can load it all up on here. And so now we're going to go with Windows 10. Sometimes it'll come up with just this empty dialog box. You don't need to do anything in there, not yet. That's just this XML view. So just hit this little tab, and then you get this nice little GUI on how to set up your VM. And when I mean you set up a VM, you do all of it. You choose what cores you want to give, how much RAM you want to give, you set the amount of drives. So we're just going to go through this step by step. So we're going to create this for the top 4090 to start. So we'll just keep it easy and name it top MSI 4090. All right. So then the CPU mode, we're just going to be passing through some of the CPU cores. And this looks a little bit different than normal because we're actually getting the hyper-threaded cores that are showing up here, like core 0 and core 1. Because the hyper-threaded core is it's a synthetic core that's kind of ran by the master core itself. It's a little bit different. We're going to take the hyper-threaded cores, so the first 8 there, and then these that look like the P cores, we're going to select the first 8 there. So we're actually selecting the physical cores on the system itself to go to this virtual machine. So if we split it up this way, I forgot one there, then that leaves these bottom 8 and these bottom 8 left for the other virtual machine for the other 4090. So there, and now we get to select how much RAM. So I think we put 64 gigs of RAM in this system. Yeah, so let's go with a little less than half. And the reason being, there is a little tiny bit of overhead with Unraid. So I want to make sure that it has enough. So I'm not going to go with 32 gigs. I'm going to leave it a little bit for itself. So this right here, this machine type, I'm just going to leave this alone. These are the different kind of BIOS settings for trying to get different type of operating systems to run on it. But it's very good right out of the box to natively support Windows. So we're just going to leave that alone. Leave that alone. And this OS install. So this will be that Windows ISO that we dragged over. See, it's already there. It knows exactly where it's at. We simply just drug it to the root of the ISOs folder on Unraid. So we're just going to select that. And then these VirtIO drivers, remember we just downloaded those a little bit ago? They're already selected. So that'll help us in the build process. So now we need to make the actual hard drive. So yeah, we did put 2 NVMEs in there. But now we need to create a virtual hard drive. So we could create it to be a terabyte. We could create it to be 2 terabytes. And we'll kind of stripe it across the 2. But in this case, we're just going to leave it to auto, go to this directory. So just leave it alone. On the primary disk size, I'm just going to set it for 500 gig. So just 500 G will work. It doesn't matter if it's upper or lower case. And that way, in the future, if I ever need more space, I can either put more drives in there, or I can just press this little plus button, and I can always add another drive of whatever size that I might want. Really handy with Unraid to just add and take away drives. You can do it that simple. So we'll leave that alone. Leave that alone. And for right now, we're not going to pass through the 4090 because we want to do the configuration from this machine. That way we know the VM works, and that way if there is a problem with the GPU or with the virtual machine, we can diagnose it easier. So if we leave the graphics card as virtual, that means I'm going to be able to connect to it just over the network through a web interface and just see it, work on it, build it this way. It's much simpler. Turn off this start VM after creation. You can leave it there, but I think that it works a little better if you just start it, make sure your config's all good, and then just press create. So there we go. So now we got a VM that popped up. It says that it's stopped, it's not running. So from here, we want to start setting it up. Okay, so start and VNC. I want to boot from CD. So I just push any key. And then that's just a BIOS loading screen like you would get if you have an ASUS motherboard or MSI. But it's just the one that is the virtual one that's on Unraid. So we're just going to wait for it to do its thing. It's booting that Windows ISO. There we go. So just like any other normal Windows install from here. Okay, so we're going to do custom. And then here, see, no drive showed up. So this is the purpose of downloading those VirtIO drivers that I told you about. The Windows natively cannot see the virtual hard drive that we're passing through to it. So that's what this handy little button down here does. So we hit this load drivers, we're going to browse, and then we'll see in here that we have those, it comes up as a CD drive for the drivers. So just expand that, and I believe we're looking for VIO Store. Inside VIO Store, we want Windows 10, and then AMD 64. It just means it's a 64-bit operating system. So we're going to hit OK. Yep, that's a Red Hat, which is a flavor of Linux or a type of Linux. And then SCSI, or CSI, is a type of hard drive controller. So that is the driver we want. So just press Next, and then it should show us the virtual hard drive. So there, we've got a 500 gig hard drive, just like what we made it, exactly 500 gig. So just press Next, and it's just going to install. So Windows finally loaded up. All it did is sit there, restart, just like you normally install any other Windows. I don't have internet. We haven't put the driver on there yet, so there's no internet. Continue with limited setup. Now Windows started up, and again, it's just the same like every other build, but the first thing that we want to do is make sure that we install some of those drivers. So you can see here that the VirtIO is still there, and the easiest way to do that is we're just going to right-click Start, go to Device Manager, and look for things that are missing their drivers. So most important one, Ethernet controller. Now we're going to update the driver, browse my computer, browse, and then just scroll down to VirtIO and press OK, and it should find the correct network controller. Perfect, there it is, nice and quick. All right, so close that, and then we can do it the same with whatever the rest of these are. All right, so my favorite website to go to whenever I reimage or set up a new computer is ninite.com. Has everything you need for your first computer setup. So here, I'm just going to grab Chrome. You can get any of these applications you might need. But I'm looking for Steam. And the cool thing is that it compiles it all into a single install file. So you're not getting any of the bloatware. You don't have to click through a million different setups to get all the different softwares that you normally use on a daily basis, like your WinRARs, your 7-zips, Notepad++. You get it all from a single spot. Normally I get PuTTY and WinSCP. So download your Ninite. It'll compile all these apps into a single download. You can open the file. And there it is. It just does it all automatically for you. And then we're going to need NVIDIA drivers here in a little bit. Perfect. So now, yeah, and Ninite's all done. All of our new apps are installed without any headache whatsoever. So nice. Okay, so now it's time to start working on adding the GPU to the VM. This is going to be the complicated part. The rest of this is pretty easy. You can follow along. But we're going to see if we can get this GPU to pass through. So from there, let's just go ahead and power down. Once we're done getting the VM to shut down, we've got it all set up just how we like. We want to start working on getting the GPU to pass through. So like I said, this is going to be the tough part, but we're just going to be in this VMs tab, and what we're going to try to do right off the bat is see if it'll work. We're going to click on it and go to Edit, and we see all the settings we were working on earlier. And we're going to scroll down to this graphics card section. And sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. Now we're looking for the first slot GPU, so that'll be the MSI card because it's on top here. So we're going to go with that. All the other stuff goes away. You know, worst case scenario, we might have to get a ROM file or the actual BIOS of the GPU, which can go here if we're having issues passing it through, but we're going to see what we get. And then under sound card, we're going to put the other part of the graphics card. So a graphics card has two parts according to Linux, is it sees a video part and it sees a sound part. And in order for it not to get very, very angry at us, we have to pass through both of those parts at the same time. So see how this is 100.0. We're looking for 100.1. So that'll be paired with that graphics card. So I don't really know what to expect, but we're going to see if it'll work. So once we do that, we just click Update, and then we're just going to try to start it. And it's hooked up to a monitor, and we're going to see if it comes up. Yeah, so it's just a black screen, so now we got to do some more tinkering. So there's a couple different things that we can try. We can try doing a BIOS to get a BIOS for the graphics card, or try to force Unraid to disconnect from it on boot. And to do that is simpler than you think. We just need to go to the main tab, and then go down to flash drive. And then here we've got different arguments for Unraid's actual boot process. So the line I'm looking for is this. So this video off. So this is going to force Unraid right after the boot GUI, when it comes up on the screen, to disconnect from the graphics card. So to hopefully allow us to reconnect it to a VM easier. So this is specifically for scenarios when you only have the one graphics card, you know, say in the top slot, or maybe your you don't have a GPU built into your processor. So we're going to go ahead and start that, and this will require a restart of the server. So once that's done, we're just going to go ahead and reboot the server. So there we go. We've got the ASUS BIOS screen. And then, yeah, we should see this. And then the automatic countdown for Unraid. Once it gets to 1, we should see simple lines of code. And then hopefully with that line that we added to the kernel argument, we shouldn't see any lines of code afterwards. So it's just going to look like it froze here. It's going to totally look like Unraid isn't doing anything. But that's what we're going for. That means that it disconnected from the GPU, and it's no longer going to show any more additional information from Unraid. There we go. So it came back up. There it is. So root, and then whatever your password is. Perfect. There's our 2 drives. Go ahead and start. So it's still frozen on that screen, which is good. So now we're going to just try to boot again and see if we're able to do it. What usually happens is that'll go black, and then we'll see a BIOS screen if it works. Oh, there it is. So after doing some digging, we realized that these graphics cards just have so much RAM on board with 24 gig that it's kind of overloading the QEMU header, which is the type of virtualization software that Unraid uses. So in order to do that, luckily some guys out there posted back on some forums, on the Unraid forums, and we were able to get it working based on them trying to get a 3090 to work running through here. So it's very important, and I use it all the time. If you have a question out there and you're asking on forums and you figure it out, try to always go back and answer that question. Even if you're the one that found that answer, put it back out there, because chances are if you're having that question, somebody else has that question. And the Unraid forums are fantastic. That entire group of people is so good with helping each other out. So I found this, and we're looking for these couple lines of code here. So specifically this line here. I'm going to copy that. And in the VMs tab, right? So on that virtual machine where we set all the settings, we're going to hit this XML view. To this line of code, we want to add it. It's just line number 2. So we can see domain type equal KVM, but then with these extra arguments afterward. So we're just going to highlight that section of ours, paste that in, and then there's one more line to add all the way at the bottom. So right down here where we see devices and domain, we want to add these lines. We're just going to copy that, and we're going to bring it in here, paste it in. Yep, so we still have devices, it ends with domain. So now I'll just press update, and then hopefully we get it to boot. There we go. Okay, so now we see the BIOS screen. So now we've got Windows booted on its own machine. I'm not going to be controlling it from my laptop anymore. We need to be able to add some devices to it. So the devices like a keyboard and mouse in order to control it. So I am going to head over to the Apps tab. There's a couple different ways to accomplish this. This is just a good way to do it on the fly. I think it's called Hot Plug. Yep, there we go. So this Hot Plug USB, this will give us the ability to add a device to a VM that's already running. So just click install. I'll just take a quick second. There we go. It's installed. So now when we go back to the VMs tab, we get a new little box here. So we see the running VM is the top 4090. It's the only VM we have running. And then we see all the devices that are underneath of it. So if we do it this way, it'll work fine for this boot. But in the future, you'll have to do it each individual time. So here in a little bit, once we get past this section, I'll show you how to permanently attach a device to a certain VM if you'd like to do that. So here, we're just going to pass through that keyboard and mouse. So we're going to look for the Razer. Yep, attached successfully. The mouse dock, attached successfully. And this keyboard. So perfect. Now that that's all attached, I should be able to control it from here. So now we should have full control with this mouse and keyboard. That's great. So now let's go ahead and install the NVIDIA drivers we downloaded a little bit ago. And you notice we still don't have a sound driver, and we got a little X next to it. That'll all come in the NVIDIA package. Yeah, so once we got the NVIDIA drivers installed, it's pretty much a full-fledged computer. So from here, it just works and runs just like you would think a normal computer does. We can check out Task Mangler, go to Performance, and see that we have 16 cores. See all of that. Yeah, so that's all good. So now we need to get the second GPU running. So this is all up and going just fine. So now we're just going to go from in here and shut it down. Perfect. So it's stopped. So now I want to do, because I got it set up to a good point for multiple VMs to start running. So there's different ways to do this. This is just the way I'm going to do it today. We're going to go back to the Unraid, it's tower, and we're going to look for the domains folder. And then right here, that's the virtual disk that we created. So I just want to copy that. I'm going to create a new folder. It's going to be bottom Zotac 4090. Go into that, and I'm going to copy that virtual machine. So it's really just copying from kind of one NVMe to another, but it's all within the system. So it'll go really quick, even though it's 500 gig. It'll be nice and fast. So while that is copying, let's go ahead and add the second VM. So we're going to go to Windows 10, just like we did on the first one, but we're going to be selecting the opposite processors. So on the first one, we select the top 8 here, top 8 here. On this one, we're going to go for the bottom 8. The first orange circle won't go away until you select other processors. So we're going to do those and these. All right, and we're going to name this bottom Zotac 4090. And just like the other one, we're going to give it 30 gigs of RAM. Leave a little overhead. All right, leave that alone. We won't really need these ISOs, the drivers anymore, because we already installed it. So we can just get rid of those. We don't need to attach the Windows ISO because it's already installed, so don't need to do that. Primary vDisk location. That should be where we put it. Yep, it already detected it, so we don't have the option to set a size. It already found that image that we just moved over. Okay. And then we're going to select the bottom 4090, in this case the third slot. And it's the third slot because I can't get to the second slot because these cards are so huge. Not until they're water blocked anyway. So once we select that, a lot of information goes away. Sound card, again, we're looking for that 3.00.1. And then here we can permanently attach. So this is the other way that we can attach devices. So in here it would be more of permanently attached. Each time we boot the VM, those devices will be there. So in this case, I'm going to select the Corsair mouse and this keyboard. And we're going to unselect Start VM because remember we've got to go and edit that template because of how much VRAM these have. So don't start. So we'll go ahead and create it. So now we have the bottom Zotac. We want to go back and edit it. Switch to XML view. And then we're going to grab that code again. So this is down at the bottom. Right between the devices and the domain. We're going to paste it. Then we're going to go back and grab the top line of code. Here. And paste it there. All right, update it. So one thing to note that you can go in and edit these at any single point in time. Just clicking on it, go in there. And you might add more RAM or you want to change the hard drive or whatever. It's totally fine. You can absolutely do that. You can permanently attach the devices. But whenever you edit it in this view, it's actually going to get rid of those custom lines that we added. So these lines won't be there anymore once you do any sort of edit in this view. So do your edits, it's totally fine, but then just make sure that you add these lines of code back in after each edit. You know, until hopefully someday the QEMU stuff get updated and we won't have that problem anymore. But now we should be able to boot up both of these VMs. All right, so there we have the Zotac 4090 booted up and the MSI. So from here, I permanently added the Corsair and that mouse to the Zotac, but I want to go to the top MSI and reconnect our Razer. So again, just showing you two different ways you can do this. This works really good if you say plug a thumb drive into the computer and you want to pass your USB stick to a certain VM. Then this is the way that I'd recommend doing it. So it's not permanently attached. Now we have two complete machines. Now we're just going to set them up. We're going to get some games installed and then hope for the best and check back once we have more benchmarks. All right, let's try doing some benchmarks. I'm thinking we'll run two different types of applications at once. So I'm going to try to do 3D Mark like Port Royal over here, and then maybe the benchmark of Shadow of the Tomb Raider on the left, and just kind of see how it does with different types of workloads at the same time. All right, so it looks like Port Royal is running. Let's try running the benchmark over here. Holy crap. We're above 200 FPS in Tomb Raider. I'll drop it down a little bit there. That is crazy. See, it's neat. I'm not seeing any hitching going between different scenes or anything like that. It just looks perfect. And Tomb Raider's running at max settings at 2K. Okay, that's pretty cool. I mean, to be able to see average 170 FPS on Tomb Raider, maximum settings, DLSS quality at 2K, yeah, 170 FPS. I mean, we're CPU bottlenecked, which is to be expected, and we're literally cutting the CPU in half, doing what we're doing. But that is pretty phenomenal. I mean, this would be great for a build with a couple of people with a couple of 2K monitors or even some super ultra wide. I mean, most people are only at 140 FPS anyway, or 144 hertz monitors. This would run that absolutely perfectly. Yeah, at the exact same time of running Tomb Raider, we have 3D Mark running Port Royal, and we got 21,730 is the score. That is unbelievable. We've got Doom Eternal over here, highest graphic settings at 2K, currently getting around 350 FPS. Yeah, absolutely buttery smooth. And then we're going to try to run Cinebench on the other half of the cores at the same time and kind of see what we get. So let's see. Let's see if I can play it while that runs. I'm not seeing any difference in frames. So testing two completely different workloads at the same time. Honestly, that ran way better than I thought it was going to. I mean, we scored 17,048 in Cinebench on half the processing cores, and we were pretty much above 300 FPS on maximum settings in Doom the entire time. Those are two completely different types of workloads. There was no hitching, no problems. I didn't see any sort of artifacts or anything like that. This is the type of thing that I think there could be an actual market for. It's pretty darn interesting. The one thing is, without water cooling these graphics cards, I don't see any way of actually getting these to sit on a single motherboard. They're so thick. You know, you'd have a challenge to deal with all the heat that these cards put off without doing a full, complete water loop. But, you know, say you could get these into a single chassis. This is pretty amazing. I'm really impressed. I went into this not even knowing if this would work. I hadn't seen anything about it. You know, it's all very, very new tech, and sometimes new tech and Linux is kind of, it's not really a thing that usually goes together, but I'm really impressed. This is really cool. All right, we thought we'd go ahead and start firing it up and see if we can actually get two players to play at once. Figured we'll try it on one of the most CPU intensive games out there, Cyberpunk. Since we're splitting these cores, I'm really curious how this is going to handle it with the 4090. So we've got it fired up, one running on each core, or one running on each VM, and we're going to see how it plays.
What settings were we on?
I think we did ray tracing medium. So just to kind of keep it the same way across the board, we didn't tweak any settings. This is just the raw performance with the ray tracing medium setting. So.
Cool. Let's get into it. Looks really good.
Yeah. Get out of this car. It's really smooth.
Yeah, super smooth. I'm running mid to high 50s up into mid 60s.
Yeah, I think it's really the processor that's bottlenecking us on this game. Yeah, because we're only using like 50 to 60% of the GPU.
So obviously a more GPU dependent game would run much higher frames, but this,
Yeah.
even this, I mean, 60 frames for a game like this, you really want to go for resolution anyway on a Cyberpunk game. So.
Yeah, you're looking for it to be more pretty than...
Right.
Yeah, it's not a competitive shooter. You know, we were playing Doom just a minute ago, and we were above 300 FPS while running Cinebench on that end. We need some water blocks.
Right. EK, hook it up. We need water blocks. Stat.
Oh, that'd be a fun build for sure.
Stay tuned. They're definitely coming. So yeah, I mean, I'm running mid 60s in the entire time, even during firefights and crowds and.
Yep. I'm up at 110 now, but I'm still stuck in the cutscenes.
So, Cyberpunk, really CPU intensive game. Handling it, to me, super acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really a pretty awesome concept if you think about it.
Especially if you have a gaming family.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
don't want to have two complete dedicated rigs.
Yep, you got more than one person in the house that wants a super high performance computer. And the other thing I didn't mention is that you don't have to have matching GPUs to do this. We could do this with a 4090 and a 3070. You can do it with one AMD GPU and one NVIDIA GPU. We don't have to have matching hardware to make this work. That's what's so cool about Unraid is we literally take the raw device and we can just pass it through to a virtual machine.
Wow. So if you're a dad out there and have two kiddos and both of them want a PC and you already have one, just add a GPU, split the cores, and off to the races.
Actually, the most that I've done on Unraid is I've done 3 3080s before on a Threadripper processor before. So I passed 6 cores to each of those, and we were able to play 3 different games all at one single time It was really, really cool. Yeah, I'm 170, 172.
I'm in a firefight, still hitting 180.
Yeah.
I died because I'm looking at the frame counter. Yeah, I'm still hitting 180. I mean, just fine. Max settings, looks beautiful.
Yep.
The shadows are, you know, awesome, of course. Fire texture, shadows in the fire. I mean,
Yeah, everything's looking good.
So-
GPU's sitting at 42% or 42C. Yeah.
yeah, nice and cool. 75% usage on them.
Mm-hmm.
So plenty to go still.
You know, I do think there's a little bit of optimization we could do, like lowering some CPU settings, because really I'm only using 80% of the GPU. So I just wonder if we tweaked with it a little bit, we could probably get a high amount of frame rate out of this.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Sweet.
So comment down below. He mentioned you can do multiple GPUs, different GPUs. Comment down below if there's maybe a setup that you're wanting to test at home, or add a GPU to your 13900 rig and split it, and you just want to curious about the performance. Comment down below. Maybe we'll add a 3070 and a 4090 or what have you, and
yeah.
see what the settings are like. So,
Or if there's any games we forgot, even want to
or
see
if there's
some
any games,
benchmarks.
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what the 7950 does and how it compares. I guess that's it.
Yeah. I think so.
So on to the part 2, 7950. Stay tuned for that. If you're an AMD fan, we'll see how it stacks up against the new 13900K.
That'll be awesome. That'll be really cool.
See you next time.